United States of America is in a remarkable moment in time. Many people will talk about this moment in history as if it harkens to, the potential fall of the Republic, the end of Rome. You hear all of these sorts of alarmist prognostications in terms of where we may be going as a country. And the truth is we've been in difficult spurts before. We've fought world wars. We've had to deal with massive social unrest in the past, massive social injustices. The United States of America has been through difficulty time and time again and has always come out the other end of it stronger. And I have every confidence that we'll be able to do so today. But if there's one thing that makes the moment that we are in troubling in perhaps a unique way, even as you get beyond social media, even as you get beyond, sort of the 24-hour news cycle and some of the various different ways in which our problems are somewhat, modern and have a different flavor than they had before. It is the fact that within the heart of our communities, within the heart of our institutions, and within American families, there is a sense that we no longer have deep things in common with each other anymore. That by virtue of being Republicans, by virtue of being Democrats, by virtues of being progressives and conservatives and what have you, we do not share a common commitment to the American project. And perhaps even more fundamentally and more concerning, that we do not share a common commitment to the well-being of one another. Because after all, how could you vote for Donald Trump and not be a fascist or a racist? How can you support Black Lives Matter and not be a communist or a radical? This is where our conversation has devolved to in this country. And so what's missing in America today is something deeply fundamental, something deeply spiritual, even if we take that with a little s, and something that requires us to go inward for reserves of character within ourselves to be able to advance the things that we believe politically in the short term, in the context of an election cycle, while also being able to set the path of American community, institutions, and personal relationships on a trajectory of stability that can allow this democracy, this democratic republic, to endure to the next generation. So what do I mean by that? So, as Andrew mentioned, I work with an organization called Braver Angels, largest grassroots bipartisan org in the country working on the subject of political depolarization. We have 10,000 dues-paying members across the country, about 75 local bipartisan alliances and chapters, presences on college campuses across America. There are a lot of different things that we do, but at the heart of our work is the innovation of a spectrum of workshops, public gatherings and convenings, and other methodologies that give people the tools necessary to be able to engage with one another in a spirit of what I like to refer to as patriotic empathy. This idea that our love for America is demonstrated in our concern for one another. And, quite literally in many cases, for example, we have a workshop where we bring small groups of folks, reds and blues, as we say in-house, conservatives and liberals together to talk from the vantage point of personal experience in terms of why they see politics the way that they do. It's literally the application of marriage counseling to the relationships between Republicans and Democrats, which, makes some sense, obviously. But fundamental to this work that we do, and to the way I encourage people to approach conversation, is this axiomatic commitment to goodwill as the starting point for civic and social engagement. And in my case, that commitment comes directly from the philosophy of nonviolence as it was taught by Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King believed in this idea of nonviolence, but what it is in a sense, a spiritual philosophy that can be applied to social questions, and it rests upon the assumption that love, agape love, as he would have said, which is essentially translatable as goodwill, is something that can call out the better angels in the nature of the opposition while also strengthening the inner man, so that through the Spirit, through signaling goodwill and love for one another, we are able to demonstrate for the opposing party that we are not enemies. We may be opponents, but that ultimately we seek the realization of the things we believe in politics so that we can create a better country for all Americans, a better world for all human beings. And so Dr. King said in his own time, he said, we seek not to defeat or humiliate the opponent. We seek not to defeat or humiliate the white man, but to rather win his understanding and win his friendship so that we may be reconciled to one another in the beloved community. And in his era, in his age, the nonviolent movement, though it did not solve all problems, introduced a new moral consciousness to American society based on an ethos of civic engagement that hearkened to our higher values and our higher tradition as a democratic republic, as a nation informed by the great Abrahamic and other religious traditions that transformed the future of this country such that it allowed for a person like myself to be born. I come from a very, in some respects, sort of different family background. And so, some of you will be amused to know that when I was nominated for Congress, I was 26 years old, 2014. I actually ran against Maxine Waters in that election cycle. And for anybody who doubts my commitment to, pursuing charity and goodwill in politics in the face of intense opposition. And, but whether I was speaking to a Black Democratic church in inner city Los Angeles or to a white Tea Party club in South Bay LA County, people would frequently ask me, they would say, what at the age of 26 makes you capable and qualified to represent a district as diverse and complicated as the California 43rd? And I would say to people, well, I have an interesting family background. My mother is a liberal Black Democrat from inner city Los Angeles. My father is a conservative white Republican from Tennessee. I grew up explaining my father to my mother to my father, and that's why I can represent all of you. And so that's, that's how that tended to go. At the root of that story is another story. When I was a little kid, I grew up in multicultural Culver City, California. I had 3 native environments. My mother's family in the hood, my father's parents were very wealthy. My grandfather owned a big record label in the 60s. Dad grew up in Bel Air. They had a house off the water in La Jolla, California, down the street from Mitt Romney's house, the one with the car elevator that they used to talk about in 2012. But day to day, I grew up with friends who were Middle Eastern, Black, Latino, Jewish, et cetera, et cetera. And, I was blessed to live in an America where I was celebrated just for being me, just for being the product of the intersection of all of these different cultures. But the cultural differences and the experiences of my parents had a toll on my home because they didn't understand each other particularly well, and they would separate when I was still fairly young. I can remember them, one of the few things they had in common was that they were both headstrong personalities, screaming and shouting at each other as was their wont to do, arguing over something. And at the age of 4 or 5, I can recall running in between them, putting my hands over my ears, and screaming at them to stop screaming at each other. And I realized somewhere along the way when somebody gave me cause to remember that I guess I've been doing that sort of thing ever since. What I've learned through my experiences, through my own family and traveling America, talking to Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, Black, white, immigrant, native-born, et cetera, is that we all have different opinions on how the country perhaps ought to be run on the level of policy. And I wouldn't be naive enough to say that we do not have ideological and value positions that sometimes are in deep conflict with each other. But everybody's perspective is born from their experience in one way or another. And every human being's experience is a human experience. And so when we engage one another, as we seek to advance the things that we believe in, whether it be the freedom of religion, whether it be the power of the free market to lift all boats and create opportunity, whether it be the integrity of the Constitution or any other matter, whether you're on the left or the right, showing our opposition that we hear them, that their experiences matter to us even if we disagree with their conclusions, is how we purchase the moral opportunity to be heard in return by people who can recognize that the fact of our listening indicates that we bear goodwill towards them, even if we don't offer agreement. And so I have a quick formula, rhetorically, that you can apply to your own communications that is taken from some of our workshops. That'll be a little bit of a tidbit for you guys to take into your own personal lives. It's called the LAP formula. If you're in a conversation with somebody on a different side of a political issue, it looks like it might be something that has the potential for tension and conflict, you start with L, listen. Listen to the other person's perspective. Ask them questions. Why do you feel this way? Is there something in your experience that makes you think that socialized medicine is the best way to deliver health care, that makes you pro-choice, et cetera, et cetera? Acknowledge. This is key. if you cannot articulate the beliefs of the person or people you are speaking to in terms that they themselves would agree reflect their sentiments, then we are not wholly understanding what the other side believes. And at the very least, we are not giving ourselves the opportunity to communicate that depth of understanding. But if I have somebody tell me that they are pro-choice and I am able to say, okay, so because you have an experience where people have told you on the basis of being a woman how to live your life and what to do with your body, and you've been experienced being disempowered by male authority figures, this is something that really makes sense to you as a position to hold. If you can show that empathy, then you gain trust, acknowledgement, pivot. And it's a short step, but it's important. I look at this a little bit differently. And the importance of using the I statement is dramatic because it shows humility. Your point of view may in fact be a point of fact, but showing it as merely a product of your human perspective humanizes the conversation. And then perspective. I see this a little bit differently. Here's why I believe in a right to life. Or here's why I believe in the Constitution as it stands. Whatever the case may be. There are technical ways we can pursue these conversations, and we can learn and be strengthened in our ability to advance a transformation of the social fabric across the spectrum of American institutions and politics. But all techniques aside, it starts with goodwill and a willingness to love your enemy as you love yourself. And that's my time. Thank you very much.